Good afternoon, and welcome to Justice for All. I'm George Yates, and we'll be here for the next hour with another show. And it's a lovely day out there. We're live here from the studios at K-Talk Radio, 1650 AM here at WHKT in Portsmouth. And if you want to give us a call, it's 454-1650. And anyway, looking forward to today's show. I want to thank everybody that came out to the Ping Pong for Charity event last night at the field house out at down at Lansdowne, and that was a really cool event. The DeLoreans played, and the Evan Button Band opened up for them, and that was a great event. When last week, if you listened into the show, you heard that Scott Sauer and Ken Lees, who founded this charity for brain disease and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all that kind of stuff. And they formed this charity, and boy, there was a lot of people. There was a silent auction and a live auction, and wow, that DeLoreans band played, that 80s kind of sound. It's very cool. That's a great band. It's the first time I'd ever heard them. So thank you again for coming out. Those of you out there that listened to the show last week and heard about it, missed it, maybe next year, you can, in fact, I think there's another event in March for Ping Pong for Charity. And we're happy to be associated with that event. So also our show today is brought to you by the Village Butcher, which is where I go get my meat every day when I'm ready to go eat some of that grass-fed beef. And today I think I'm going to leave the studio and go get my pork chops and my ribs, my baby back ribs. It's there at Hilltop West, 1608 Hilltop West in the Hilltop Shopping Center there in Virginia Beach. And they're a sponsor of this show here, Justice for All. If you join us from time to time, you know that's I'm a lawyer in Virginia Beach. I've been doing that for 25 years now, and every Saturday I get on here and I deconstruct people that know a lot about things that I don't know about. They're a lot smarter than me, so I try to learn a lot. I figure if I'm going to learn something, then maybe you as a listener might learn something too. Most of the time I interview lawyers and judges and former prosecutors and law professors and writers and authors, and they write books about the Supreme Court, and they're all sorts of legal analysts who know about prisons, and we focus on justice issues a lot because I'm a lawyer and it interests me. But some days we deviate from that and we just try to get into some other kinds of issues. So today is going to be one of those days, and of course I'm sure we're ending up with some justice issues anyway because of the nature of our guest today. His name is Jackson Mckenzie. He's the author of Psychopath Free, and he's got a website called psychopathfree.org. I believe we'll get his information from him in just a minute. He's on the line with us. But this is a book about what it's like to be in a relationship with someone that has a kind of a toxic personality, if you will, someone that's a narcissist or a sociopath, someone that continues to do these kinds of things that you don't understand. And Mr. Mckenzie, I guess, was a victim of one of these kinds of people. He wrote a book about it as, I think, a form of therapy as I get it from the book. And so I'd like to welcome him to the show today. We're going to get more from him. Jackson Mckenzie, the author of Psychopath Free. Welcome to the show, Jackson.
Hey, George. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, listen, I read your book, and it's fascinating. As a criminal defense lawyer, I run across these folks. Sometimes, the people that I guess you don't really see them coming. I read your book, and it's like you were a victim of somebody that used this kind of, manipulative behavior. Tell us what you learned, what's your book about what it's like to be psychopath-free.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm so excited to be talking with you because I think this is one area that we haven't gotten to branch out into too much with the legal territory, so this will be really exciting. The book is about manipulative people, especially in the cluster B spectrum. The cluster B disorders are sociopaths, narcissists, borderline personality, and histrionic. These sets of relationships, they follow a very particular pattern of behavior, whether it be in the workplace, relationship, in the family. It's always intense idolization, personality mirroring. They're kind of chameleons. They can really take any role that they need to take and then reflect that on you. So that's usually how these dynamics start, which opens up a pretty quick bond of trust between their target and them. And then slowly, I'm sure as you saw in the book, it kind of unravels into these very manipulative and confusing mind games that are really designed to just lower your self-esteem and make you doubt your sanity. Most of the people that we find, we work with thousands of people every day who have encountered these types of disorders, and the end result is always the same. These people leave behind a trail of destruction, financially, emotionally, and ultimately just really leave their targets extremely confused as to what just happened, because our default understanding of humanity is going to be that everyone has some good in them. The research that Dr. Robert Hare and Dr. Martha Stout have done have really kind of turned that around to say that 4% of human beings don't have a conscience. They have no remorse for their behavior, and they actually look for opportunities to cause harm to others.
Well, how in the world does one recognize this personality type? You were in a relationship with a toxic personality for some time, and for those of us that don't know as much about this subject as you do, and I've done a bit of research into this too, when you want to know about what a borderline personality is, or a narcissistic personality, antisocial personality, histrionic personality, those are the four types that, in my understanding, are part of this, what you call cluster B personality types, and they're in what they call the DSM-5. You can go online and go to the DSM-5 and know more about cluster B. You can Google cluster B, and it'll all come up, won't it? And it will tell you and give you the traits that you can then begin to identify this kind of a person that might be in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of times, especially at first, it's really difficult to pin these down. You may notice histrionic and narcissists can be the over-the-top schmoozing type of personality. You kind of think of like the womanizer, the flashy car, the dramatics, and all that stuff. When it comes to sociopath, psychopath, the grooming phase is much more insidious. It's very slow. It's subtle. It's not at all over the top. Oftentimes, they'll come across as exceptionally innocent, kind, sweet. So it can be really difficult at first, but you're absolutely right that those traits that are listed in the DSM are going to be the best way to have an understanding of what you might be dealing with. Of course, the best way and the only way would be to have some sort of diagnosis, but as we know with manipulative people, that's not always going to be possible. So our best bet is to just be aware of these different disorders, the various behaviors that are associated with them, and to be able to protect ourselves from that, because we definitely want to understand that these disorders are incurable, untreatable, and largely they will never seek out therapy or help because they don't believe that there's anything wrong with them.
So it's an incurable condition, is that right? I mean, my understanding of it is a lot of therapists won't treat folks with borderline personality because it's incurable. So, and even insurance won't pay for that kind of treatment, right?
That's exactly right. And I think borderline personality, there are some recommended treatments. DBT is one of them, also some CBT. But again, no cure. And then you come across
what is DBT? What does DBT stand for?
It's dialectical behavioral therapy, and what that does is it's similar to CBT in that you work through
what is CBT?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay, great. Cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy. Yeah,
and so you're looking at your thought processes and what goes on, and trying to work on those default reactions to things. So people with borderline personality disorder tend to have this intense fear of abandonment, which drives these very, very rapid mood changes and unstable senses of self. That is not true of sociopaths and psychopaths. They have an extremely centered, confident sense of self, and there's no known treatment or cure for them, not even any sort of talk therapy, because it's hard to treat someone who doesn't believe there's anything wrong with them.
Well, that's the problem with it, isn't it? It's sort of like a catch-22. You could treat borderline personality if the person recognized that they had it and was willing to go into treatment, but they won't recognize that they have it, and they say there's nothing wrong with them. It's everybody else that's at fault.
That's exactly right, and that's often how these dynamics unfold too. Is that it's always someone else's fault. So you'll find that no matter how badly they treat you, whether it be in your family, verbal abuse, insults, just minimizing you and treating you as an object, or in a relationship, cheating, lying, in a workplace environment, stealing, screwing people over, conning people to get to the top, you'll always find that no matter how bad the behavior it is, it's always that person's fault. It's their fault, and it's never actually the perpetrator's fault. It's the fault of the people that they've targeted.
Well, now, this person that, and you describe, apparently you were in a relationship with a psychopath. Now, and just for the record here, from a scientific standpoint, as I look through the DSM-5, there is no such diagnosis as a psychopath or a sociopath. I mean, that's more of a generic term, right? I mean, what I see is they call it, there's antisocial personality, there's narcissistic, there's borderline, there's histrionic. When you call psychopath, isn't that sort of a catch-all phrase for all of these types of behaviors?
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm not a mental health professional, and so I try not to focus too much on labels and diagnosis, and really just looking at, these patterns of behavior that happen in all of those different disorders, and just helping people recognize and move past those. Right.
Well, now, you were in a relationship with this person for some time before you were able to extricate yourself, and what I'm trying to figure out, I guess, there must be some good in it. There must be a way that the psychopath, if you will, the person with these kinds of, what do you call these personality disorders, is a broad term, right, to encompass what these people are. You call them toxic people, but they really have what they call personality disorders, right?
Yep.
And what is it? Do they do good things for you at first? I mean, there's something that's really good that sort of, ropes you in, and you, as you say, they kind of see people that are targets, and then what? They after a while, then you start seeing the bad behavior, but you're unable to extricate yourself because what is it about the interaction, I suppose, between the victim and the toxic person that keeps the relationship going? Why doesn't the victim just get away, move out, or make the other person move out?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we actually get almost every day of people who join. At the forum, they say, why did I stay in this for so long? How could I have been so stupid? The way emotional abuse works is that it really it targets our most vulnerable human emotions in a way that, unless you're aware that it's happening, when you're actually in the cycles of it, all it does is make a more and more intense bond. And so, like you said in the beginning, they're experts at sniffing out things like your insecurities, vulnerabilities, and dreams. You can be guaranteed that within 5 minutes of meeting you, they're aware of those things. And the next step for them is to flatter those things and to make you feel comfortable about them. So insecurities and vanities, that every human being has them. A lot of us, though, aren't going to actually be aware that we have them, whereas a psychopath will be aware of that for you. And they'll take care of it and make you feel very, very good. The common phrase is you start to feel like you're the only person in the world. And then as the relationship progresses, especially with psychopaths, this is where all of the disorders kind of branch off. So you look at the sociopath end of things, the antisocial personality disorder. It's about this boredom and this desire to relieve that boredom, which involves causing harm to other people. So when that relationship starts to turn sour, it's because they're bored and they want to see something interesting happen. And that doesn't. The thing about the love, idolization, and all that stuff is it's kind of this just fun attention type of get all this adoration from their target. But then the more fun part is watching that person self-destruct, and that's where the sociopath really kind of differs from the other disorders. Is that they're really trying to cause harm, and you can be guaranteed of it in any relationship with one of them, because and if you look at, it's really fascinating and kind of scary. If you read works by different self-proclaimed sociopaths and psychopaths, you'll see them talking about how they like to destroy people, and I use that word, quote unquote, destroy people from the inside out. And so the goal is to watch that person self-destruct and think they're going crazy. And that's for you and me, it might be go watch a game or go play a sport or read a book or something. For a sociopath, it's to destroy people. And
what books are these for future reading for our people? Because as you as you may know, I'm going to upload this show to YouTube and to my website, so it'll be there for people to to listen to. While we're going on the show, first of all, if you've just joined us, I'm with Jackson Mckenzie, and he's the author of Psychopath Free. First of all, you have an organization. What is that again, Jackson?
It's psychopathfree.com.
Okay, so you can go online, and that's a resource for people that want to know more about defending themselves against this. And you've said there's some books by folks that might be enlightening. What are the names of those authors and books, if you might?
Yeah, there's two that I know of. One is called Confessions of a Sociopath by M.E. Thomas, and the other is called The Psychopath Inside by James Fallon.
Wow, James Fallon. Now, I've heard of him. Is he,
Yeah.
Okay. And The Psychopath Within, what's it called?
The Psychopath Inside.
The Psychopath Inside. And The Confessions of a Sociopath, the author of that?
M.E. Thomas.
Amy?
M.E.
M.E. Thomas. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and so first of all, once how long were you in this particular relationship with this toxic person?
It was about a year.
Only a year to have this kind of a devastating impact on you, that you wrote a book and started an organization about it.
Yeah, and we find even people that have had an encounter that's like a month long, that's all it takes for their entire life to turn completely upside down. They lose lifelong friends, they lose their jobs. It's really kind of mind-boggling.
But there's a bit of a difference between these personality types, right? The borderline personality, I think the most famous example of that was the Fatal Attraction movie. I think that she was considered a borderline personality. But that's the fear of abandonment. Now, you describe in your book a sociopath or a psychopath, if you will, that was already looking for their next target while they were jerking you around. That's not the borderline personality type, is it? Isn't the borderline personality type the one that doesn't want to leave you no matter what, even when you're trying to kick them out? Yeah,
that's correct. And with a borderline, you'll often see infidelity, cheating, and all that stuff, but it's not driven. It's like exactly like you just said. It's not the same motive. The motive is not really going to be to intently cause harm. It's this intense fear of abandonment that they have that drives them to pretty much ruin any relationship that they have, because they're always terrified that that person's going to leave them, which makes them behave in ways that actually makes that person want to leave them. And then they will do anything that they can to avoid that real or imagined abandonment. But oftentimes, one of the biggest qualities of borderline personality disorder is this this really lack of sense of self, of who you are, your identity. There's a lot of dissociation going on there. And so when they cheat or do those kind of things, it's not about doing all these different courting things like a sociopath and getting all that extra attention. It's about trying to get that feeling of self-worth, that high, and feeling like you're okay.
How many of these folks, personality types, end up in jail? It sounds to me like you've got folks that break the rules, that lie, that steal, that do all kinds of stuff, right? That have a problem with holding down jobs, probably get fired from jobs and thrown out of various places. How many people sitting in jails right now, since we're a Justice for All show? Some of this is criminal behavior, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of what Dr. Robert Hare worked on, was studying prison psychopaths. And his book, Without Conscience, is fascinating. What's
the name of that book?
Without Conscience.
Without Conscience, because that's what characterizes this whole personality type. These folks do not have consciences. They do these things. They have absolutely no remorse. They have no empathy for their victims. They enjoy destroying people, is what you've said. And it's very and what percentage of the population have these kinds of disorders? Because in your book, it was fascinating how you said, there's a lot more people out there with these kinds of disorders than is well known, and that's what really struck you and made you write the book.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty shocking. And Martha Stout wrote about this too, about just how prevalent these are compared to some common everyday things that we all know about, whereas most people really wouldn't be talking about if you mention borderline or a sociopath outside of, like, okay, serial killers or fatal attraction. And And so, yeah, we look at Martha Stout was the one for this who said that sociopaths make up around 4% of the general population, most of them not being incarcerated or in prison. So, meaning that their behavior, although extremely hurtful and dangerous, has not driven them to prison, likely because they're able to very smooth talk themselves out of a lot of those situations. Borderlines, I believe, from the National Institute of Health were at around 3 or 4% of the general population again, and then was narcissistic personality disorder was 6%.
So do you group these all together then, or is there some overlap? Do some people be considered more than one of those types? I mean, is there sort of a cluster B personality where you exhibit the traits of all of them, or what do you end up if you, let's say out of a population of 100 people, how many can you expect to have one or more of these kinds of conditions?
Yeah, I mean, by the odds there, I think in the book I talk about how all of those together add up to more than 15%, but we talk about comorbidity, so that means like people that have maybe one or more of the disorders. And so the ones that match up there in terms of having one or more are probably narcissists and sociopaths. A lot of sociopaths are going to have narcissistic qualities.
That would be the antisocial personality and the borderline?
Yeah.
Right.
And
I'm sorry, the narcissist.
then you might see the histrionic and the borderline overlap a bit too. Histrionic and borderline may not overlap as much, though, with those other two. You may see some borderline with some narcissistic personalities, but or some narcissistic qualities. But, you know, in the end, even if you cut that 15% in half to account for comorbid behaviors, you're still looking at 7-8% of the general population, which is a pretty big number.
Really? I mean, that's enormous. That means like 1 out of every 12 people that you run into is going to be somebody that's manipulative, lying, stealing, cheating, and no conscience. That's kind of an amazingly high number, especially when you realize that you can't always see them coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is Robert Hare wrote that if he was going to keep studying psychopaths, he wouldn't go back to prison. He'd be looking at Wall Street in Washington, D.C. So it's really pretty fascinating about how pervasive these disorders can be, and really we look at sometimes the behavior of people around us and say, how could someone do that? That's so ridiculous. It's so crazy. And these disorders actually really help to describe some of those. How could someone do that? Because when someone doesn't have a conscience or is driven by these intense idolization, devalue cycles, their behavior really just doesn't match up with anything that a normal empathetic person is going to understand as regular human behavior.
Yeah, it's hard for people that actually have a conscience and that have empathy for other people to even comprehend how anybody could be this way. It's almost, it's kind of, that's what makes it all so scary. I wanted to, for our listeners who are interested or perhaps taking notes, that last book, Without Conscience, what's the author of that again?
That's Robert Hare.
Spell his last name?
Hare.
Is he a doctor, a PhD, MD?
Yeah, I believe a PhD, and I mean, he really pioneered the entire study of psychopathy.
Wow, psychopathy, okay.
Yeah.
Well, now, what is the, I guess, what's the big word for that? What's the etiology of all of this? How does somebody develop, and let's talk about it a little bit, or is male, female, is there any gender specific, as I understand, borderline personalities are almost 3 out of 4 or more are women, whereas antisocial, from what I've been able to research, are more men. And then the others, I think, break down kind of 50-50. What can we expect in terms of a gender split first? And I'm asking you a double question. What causes these kinds of conditions to arise in the first place? And then after that, and if we can't take a short answer for us now, Jackson, and we'll go for a quick break here. My engineer's telling me that I got, about a minute? Got about a minute, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some more of the details of how these personality disorders develop.
Great. Yeah, exactly as you just said, the National Institute of Health breaks down narcissists and sociopaths as more commonly male than female, borderline and histrionic more commonly female than male. I don't remember the exact percentages, but it's very similar to the 3 out of 4 that you put there. And then in terms of what causes these, there's a lot of debate around it all the time. I'm always fascinated by it just in terms of reading and understanding, but it's the classic debate of nature versus nurture. And I think people are working very hard to try to understand which one or a combination of both would cause that.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, listen, we're going to go to a break, and I'm having a great time here. I hope you out there are listening to this show. You know, it's interesting to me before we go to the break, but you don't have to be a doctor or have a college degree or a master's or a PhD to be an expert upon something. I'm learning that all the time here, and Mr. Mckenzie here seems to know as much about these disorders as any professional would. So we're going to come back and spend another 30 minutes in our analysis of the psychopaths among us. 1 out of 12, I guess we've determined. We'll be right back after a short break with Jackson Mckenzie.
323.
Leaky faucet, refinishing old countertops. Hey, Gary Sullivan.
Second Saturday of top 25 college football today. We'll see top-ranked Ohio State home for Hawaii. Number 2 Alabama hosts Middle Tennessee. It's third-ranked TCU hosting Stephen F. Austin. Number 4 Baylor is home for Lamar. The marquee matchup of the day has the 2 top 10 teams squaring off in Michigan.
Hi, this is Greg Picaveras, inviting you to join me for Sports Scene live each Wednesday from noon to 1, right here on News Talk 1650 and TuneIn.com by typing WHKT in the search box. Excellent guests and interaction at Greg Bick on Twitter, all powered by HamptonRoadsOnlineMall.com. Sports Scene each Wednesday from noon to 1, right here on News Talk 1650.
Leaky faucet, refinishing old countertops. Hey, Gary Sullivan here. Perhaps you're restaining a deck or painting your living room. Whatever it is, let me help. I'm here to give you the tips you need to finish those pesky projects you've been putting off. If you're restaining, I have a tip for that. Can't get the paint off the hardwood floors? Got a tip for that too. I'm here to make sure that $5 repair doesn't turn into a $500 repair. Join me right here every weekend.
Saturdays at noon, Sundays at 9 a.m. on AM 1650 WHKT, The Answer. Are you prepared to defend yourself and your family against any threat? Veteran-owned and operated One Shot Trading Post is ready to make sure that you are. Continuing training and classes on defense, survival, and weapons. Full gunsmithing services, special orders and financing available with military discounts. $15 transfers, and One Shot Trading Post is always looking to buy, sell, or trade. Located at 4366 Holland Road at South Plaza Trail, make sure that you're ready for anything at One Shot Trading Post, 463-5893, OneShotTradingPost.com.
Mark Levin here, reminding you to tune in every evening, 6 to 9 p.m. for some no-holds-barred opinions and discussion of what's happening. If you don't have an opinion, don't worry. I'll give you one. So you have no excuses not to join the Mark Levin Show, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 p.m. on your source for conservative talk radio, AM 1650 WHKT. Now, we have some real problems in our country, and they won't get any better by themselves. Be a part of the solution. Mark Levin, weekdays 6 to 9 on K-Talk 1650.
Mi Hogar is your restaurant for the finest Mexican cuisine in Hampton Roads. At Mi Hogar, everything is prepared fresh in a casual atmosphere. Enjoy traditional favorites such as quesadillas, tacos, burritos, and fajitas, as well as refreshing beverages. Mi Hogar has 2 locations, 4201 Granby Street in Norfolk and 801 North Battlefield Boulevard in Chesapeake. Call ahead at 640-7705. At Mi Hogar, there is something for everyone.
Okay, we're back with our last half hour of Justice for All today. I'm George Yates, and I've been here for the last 30 minutes with Jackson Mckenzie. He's the founder of PsychopathFree.com, and he's the author of a book of the same title, Psychopath Free. We're talking about personality disorder types. Now, it's narcissists and various other kinds of psychopaths, antisocial personalities, histrionic personality, and all that kind of those folks in the cluster B. We're talking about personality disorder, which have been diagnosed. And I guess the only solution, if you're in a relationship with someone like this, you can't cure them, Jackson. So what? You just have to get away, right?
Yeah, we really recommend the practice of no contact, and then that goes even beyond breaking up and after the breakup and all that stuff. It means that you don't let them stay in touch and text and check in on a Facebook page or anything like that. You really just continue your life and pretend that person does not exist. Otherwise, you can be guaranteed that they will find ways to drag you back in. And that doesn't mean drag you back into the relationship. It might mean using you as a target to make their next person jealous, or manipulating you further to get other things that they need from you. So really, the only way you can avoid that is to set that very clear boundary of removing them from your life entirely. And we know that that's really, it can be difficult for people who are maybe in a family or in a working situation where they can't do that. So that's where we recommend just limited contact only when necessary, and putting up very, very strict boundaries. And I would say one of the biggest things that you can do for yourself if you are dealing with someone like this is to always remain calm in dealing with them, because what you're going to find with psychopaths and narcissists especially is they're trying to provoke you. They're trying to provoke reactions, and so that you then look crazy and hysterical, and then they can sit back and play victim and say, oh, look at what this person did to me and how crazy they're acting. If you remain calm completely with them, you gain that upper hand. They're trying to put you on the defensive. They're trying to make you feel like you are under attack. So if they say the perfect thing that just has you thinking, oh my God, I have to respond to that because I have this perfect response, you should know that that was intentionally planned.
Yeah, it's they're trying to bait you.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect word for it.
Yeah, and so you got to stay calm, and you've got to, if you can, you completely break it off. But are you saying that their need to destroy you it remains, or once they moved on to their new victim, don't they kind of want to leave you alone, or what?
No, I mean, because even with the new victim, what they're going to be looking for is ways to stir up trouble. So anytime someone joins their forum, the first thing they think is, how can they like this new person so much? How can things be so perfect with that person when they were so perfect with me? And what you'll very quickly find, you don't even need to wait around for it to happen, is that it will blow up the exact same way that it blew up with you. And in relationships, a very common thing that psychopaths do is keep around exes. And the reason they do that is when you first meet them, they'll groom you by telling you how crazy their ex is and how much better you are than them, how abusive their ex was, and how much kinder and more understanding you are. And as the relationship progresses, you'll find them rekindling this friendship with that ex that they told you was crazy and abusive, and starting to treat you badly. The goal there being it's a really simple human psychology, that it makes the person feel inadequate, insecure, and really unsure as to what's going on. And they will start to then accuse you of being jealous, and you start to behave jealous, and their cycle there with the triangulation is complete.
So the personality type, the toxic personality that's made you their target, what do they hope to gain by choosing you? Money, status, what? What's the point of it for them?
Yeah, I think it totally depends on the individual situation. There's so many people who are scammed out of so much money, or maybe their values and possessions. One of the most common ones we see is just people who are scammed out of their emotions and falling in love, and I think that's really one of the most upsetting ones to see, because there's nothing tangible. You can't point at it and say, oh, I should be able to get that back. It really just leaves you feeling drained, exhausted, and crazy, and really kind of afraid of new relationships for a while. So, but we do see that things like money, sex, power, opportunity can come up a lot.
Did you go into therapy, and do people that are victims of this kind of toxic person need therapy in order to recover?
Yeah, I definitely recommend talking to a professional therapist. I think it's so helpful. I remember when I first with a therapist, I was at the time trying to get back into this relationship. I was telling her about the relationship, and in my mind it was so good, and I had lost the best thing of my life, and she was the first person who said to me, oh, that sounds like a sociopath. And I thought, oh, I don't really know what that means. I thought that was a serial killer. And then she, explained all about this, shared resources and books, and before I knew it, my life went from being on this total path of destruction and mess and really just so much insecurity into transforming into something that I don't look back on it, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that happened, but I really am happy with the outcome in terms of the boundaries and self-respect that get developed after those dynamics.
So it was like you didn't really realize that you were in such a relationship because this person had convinced you that you were at fault during that period of time until you'd gotten out of it, and then you said, wait a minute, it wasn't me at all. It was this personality type that I was the victim of. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, and you'll find that of mostly anyone who comes out of one of these situations is they'll be blaming themselves for the entire thing. Even if the person stole $100,000 from you and ran off with someone else, you will sit there and think it's your fault.
It's somewhat like a kind of a codependency situation. It sounds almost like somebody in a substance abuse, an Al-Anon or, Alcoholic Anonymous kind of a thing, almost, right? I mean, did you find yourself in a situation where you were, doubting yourself? I mean, that's what substance abusers do, right? They kind of blame you for the fact that they drink or blame you for the fact they do drugs or whatever.
Yeah. The word codependency comes up a lot, and it's interesting. It's going to be different for every individual. I think some people might find maybe that they had codependent behaviors before the relationship, which is great. It's like an opportunity to introspect and learn. A lot of times we find with psychopaths and anyone in this disorder spectrum is that the relationship itself bred and manufactured this codependency because that cycle of idolize, devalue, the mean and sweet cycle, what that really does is it creates codependency. So it engineers something that wouldn't have been there otherwise by turning your emotions and your normal human understanding of the world upside down.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. How does this, you talk about the mean and sweet?
Yep.
So tell us how this starts. You're in this relationship, or for the listeners are trying to figure out what's going on here. You've got this person that's really sweet to you, really nice. You call it the idealization phase. They figure you out very quickly, where your weaknesses are, where what they need to do to flatter you and make you feel great about yourself, and so on and so forth. So all of a sudden you're going, wow, this is a great person. They get me, and all of a sudden you're in it, and now you're going, wow, I really want to be with them. And then what? Then all of a sudden they turn on you, and then you go, uh-oh, what happened here? And tell us how all that starts, so that anybody that's listening here can say, wait a minute, that's happening to me.
Yeah, definitely. And so the first thing is that the start of the devaluation is slow. It's not something. I think most people would look back and find that they can't put their finger on when things turned. And the reason for that is that psychopaths are constantly testing the waters. They're seeing how far they can push your boundaries before you react, and then they step back a little bit and continue some of the nice behavior, the personality mirroring, and that's common. That's why it's the cycle, because they're always going back to the good stuff so that your mind gets hooked on that. It creates what's called cognitive dissonance. So even when someone's treating you badly, you try to think about when you're so in love and you feel so good, and you try to understand this person as you would understand yourself, and that involves empathy, compassion, forgiveness. But when things start to turn sour, that's when we start to see a lot of the pathological lying. It's really interesting. You'll find with these people that they lie even when they don't need to lie. It's very weird. They could be going out to dinner with a friend and instead tell you that they're going to go watch a movie with their mom. And there's no reason for it. They might not be doing anything wrong or bad. It's just this pathological lying that comes through at every aspect of their life. And there's constantly excuses for everything, even things that don't need to be excused. You can just be guaranteed that they will always be coming up. And then slowly you start to find the behavior shift towards gaslighting. There's actually a movie from, I think it was like the 1980s, or maybe even before that, called Gaslight, where this term originated. And in the movie, it's really interesting. A man keeps a woman in her house and has all these qualities of being this charming, great guy at first. And then when he leaves, he flickers the gas lights in the house on and off. And she starts to think she's going crazy because every time she tells him that this is happening, he says, no, this isn't happening. And that's a really simplistic version of it, but it's exactly how gaslighting works with these people in relationships in the workplace, is they do things and then tell you that they didn't happen. And And even if they did happen, if you have evidence of it or something like that, they'll get mad at you. So it's not about like, oh, I know that this happened, I have proof. It's about, you're crazy, why are you documenting what I'm doing? So it's always turning their bad behavior around on you.
If you've just joined us, I'm George Yates, and I'm a lawyer in Virginia Beach, and this is Justice for All, and I do this show every Saturday from 2 to 3. And most of the time I'm doing legal authors and other kinds of law professors and lawyers and so on. But today I've had the pleasure of interviewing Jackson Mckenzie, who's the author of Psychopath Free and has an organization called psychopathfree.com. And he seems to know more about this personality disorder thing than just about anybody I've ever spoken to about it. If you've just joined us, we're talking about personality disorders. And that's antisocial personality, narcissists, and other sort of toxic personalities that encompass, according to Mr. Mackenzie, just about 1 out of every 12 people, 1 out of maybe even more, 1 out of 10 people. I wonder how many of these folks find themselves in positions of power in the government. I mean, if you've got this kind of ability to manipulate people, because my understanding of these personalities is they can be very manipulative to where people believe their side even more than yours. You might be in a relationship and then break up or whatever, and they were the one that was doing this terrible manipulation, but somehow they managed to convince other people that you were the one that was at fault. How often does that happen, and what does a person do to protect themselves against this kind of manipulation?
Yeah, I mean, almost every time. It's called the smear campaign. And it started before your breakup or the blow-up in a workplace situation ever even happens. So what they're doing is provoking reactions from you and then sneaking around and sharing those reactions with people to slowly show this person's going crazy. Do you see how crazy they are? So that they can literally do things like cheat on you and steal from you and do all these things that any onlooker would normally look at and say, oh, that's horrible behavior, you're a bad person. And instead, it switches. It looks at it and says, oh, that person was crazy, and they had to be left, or this had to happen. And so that smear campaign is all about just turning people, even your own friends, against you, so that you really have no support network after it's done.
But at some point, I suppose that this person or these people will eventually be caught up, right? I mean, because at some point, if they continue, if you've got somebody that is so pathological as you describe, they're ultimately going to lose jobs and not be able to pay their bills, and they're gonna break friendships, and at some point they're going to be found out, right? I mean, they can only keep up this manipulation for so long.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing with psychopaths is they're constantly moving on and forming new lives, and so to friendships and stuff like that, they can have this superficial praise, flattery that goes on, that people just like them. They have usually a fan club of people who admire them and think the world of them. It's the people that they get close to professionally, romantically, that really start to see this shadow side. And it's exactly like you said, is they have these patterns that just never stop. And so that's why we really recommend, when people are always thinking, oh my gosh, like, it's so unfair that this happened, I always just say, listen, they're going to keep doing this for the rest of your life. Opportunity to have empathy and love and all of those things. So it's really, I wouldn't trade that. So
now we're talking about these personality types, and we talked about earlier about treatment. You're saying that they're incurable. Once you've got this kind of condition, you've got it for life, and there's really very little that can be done about it.
That's correct. Yeah, there's no known treatment or cure right now.
So really, you just have to. There's no cure. At what point if the person is in therapy or wants to try to, are there any kind of treatments then for other things that might, is it ever misdiagnosed for something else, you suppose?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely other disorders that involve that low empathy, issues with emotion and stuff like that. But I think pretty rarely you're going to find someone who gets like accidentally diagnosed as a sociopath, but you'll very commonly, I think, find their victims, especially in the immediate aftermath, being diagnosed with things like bipolar or borderline, and the reason being that after a relationship like that, the victim is going to very often appear to really lose their mind for a bit.
if you're listening, we're with Jackson Mckenzie, and his book is Psychopath 3. It's available, Amazon and Barnes & Noble? I mean, this is probably it ought to be in every self-help section in every bookstore in the country, Jackson.
Yeah, it is. I appreciate that. I was really surprised to see it in Barnes & Noble around the country, so it was cool.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting when my producer got me this book, and it was just kind of on a lark. Most of my books seem to have a legal theme or a criminal justice theme, and he got me this book. I said, this guy would be great. We need to get this guy on the show. It's a fascinating thing, especially because when I read it, and I just think that there's a lot of people out there that have, we're talking about a significant portion of the population that have no conscience and that can't have empathy. In other words, they literally cannot put themselves in your shoes. They will, mess somebody over, we'll say, to use nice language since we're on the broadcast radio. And they don't feel any pain at all. They don't feel any conscience. They just do this. And you say they do it for pleasure. They'll lie for pleasure. They will screw somebody over for pleasure. They'll destroy somebody just for the fun of it. And there's books written by these folks. How in the world do you protect yourself against somebody when they're able to mask this kind of personality? Like in your case, you were with this person for almost a year. How in the world do you see it coming?
Yeah, I think some of the best things we can do really involve looking inward instead of outward. It's not going to be a very fun world if we walk around thinking, oh, is this person a psychopath? Is this person a psychopath?
Right, of course.
Whereas if we look in ourselves and we really, first of all, understand what we want from this world, we understand our passions, our interests, and we also understand the kind of darker things like our insecurities and the things that we might not even be aware of until we really think about it. Having that, I think, offers so much more than anything else, because once you have that and you have this awareness that these people exist, you can absolutely start to notice when these qualities are being targeted. And that's why a lot of people see this as a blessing in disguise afterwards, because you're almost given this golden opportunity to look back and say, okay, what did this person mirror and say in the beginning? And you'll find that all they were doing was regurgitating things about you, like your insecurities and your dreams and interests. And so it's kind of like this mirror that you have that you can just look back on and really start to introspect. Right.
Well, isn't that really the moral of many books and many kinds of what is good and what is bad? The bad things that happen to you generally can be the best things that ever happened to you. There's a purpose in everything that happens. Sort of the way of the peaceful warrior, if you will. The bad thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. And maybe in your case, look what it did. You wrote a book, and what were you doing before you wrote Psychopath 3 and formed this organization?
I work for a tech company, and I really enjoy it. Obviously, the book has been really, really busy lately, which is great. It just it took off very unexpectedly. I think we co-founded the site, me and a couple of friends that I had met through the process, and before we knew it, this tiny little forum that we started was seeing millions of page views a month. Our Facebook page, I think, has like 250,000 followers now, and it blew up way faster than anybody imagined, and that's when we realized this issue is probably a lot more common than any of us would have thought.
Well, that's what you wrote in your book, and when you started running the numbers, it's just a scary thing, And the whole thing about the pathological lying is a fascinating thing. As a criminal trial lawyer, and I do other kinds of work, but I've stood in front of juries before, and I've said to them, especially if it's a case involving credibility, and you've got maybe one witness, it's a one-witness case where you just don't believe that this witness is telling the truth. And sometimes they'll say to you, well, gee, how can you prove they're lying? Or why would they make this up? Or what's their motive for lying? And I've stood in front of juries and I've asked, has anybody ever had somebody just lie right to their face? You believed every word they said, and then you found out later that they were telling you a lie. And you'll always get a hand from almost every single person, because everybody at one time in their life has dealt with a personality type like this, where they just had an unexplained lie for absolutely no reason. Why was this person lying for that? And they obviously they were encountering one of these types of toxic personalities. And so you've got this in the culture, and you might have somebody, and that's sometimes all you can rest a case on. You say, you know what, this person's lying, and We don't even know why. There are people that will lie for absolutely no reason other than what? Just for the sheer drama of it? Is that the word that you would use?
Yeah, the drama, the boredom. It's such a great example.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm bored today. I think I'm going to go, excuse my language. I'm going to go do something to somebody. I'm going to go create drama. I'm going to go say something about somebody. I think I'll stir something up, right?
Yeah, and in the courtroom, I think it's such a good example. There's people that we see that actually they look specifically for lawyers who are familiar with these disorders because these people behave in such bizarre ways in the courtroom that it really is, you need that knowledge to understand that this person is trying to cause drama. They're trying to create chaos. They're doing whatever it takes to get a rise out of you, and unless you're prepared with that knowledge, a lot of people will go right exactly into that trap.
Well, listen, we only have a few more minutes left, so I just want to let our readers know, is there, I can't say enough about what you're doing to create really a whole new self-help resource for people that are victims of this, and you're bringing attention to a problem that's way more pervasive than probably a lot of us ever had any reason to believe. And so this last hour with Jackson Mckenzie, if you are listening to the show today, get a copy of his book, Psychopath, free, or at least go online to his organization. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about, Jackson, that we haven't had a chance? I know it's just been a quick hour. And of course, you'll be on our website and on our YouTube channel. But what else you'd like to say that we haven't had a chance to cover?
The only quick thing I would say is that if anyone has resonated with any of this and finds themselves really feeling lost and confused, which is how mostly anyone is going to feel after this, I just want to reassure you that it absolutely gets better. Those feelings of emptiness and self-blame, they really all do go away, and there comes a time when you really just don't think about that encounter anymore. All you're doing is living with the tools that you gained from it.
Well, that's great. We're going to go ahead and leave it there then, and thank you for being on our show. Once again, it's Jackson Mckenzie, Psychopath Free. His website's psychopathfree.com, and his book's available everywhere. And where are you calling us from today, Jackson? What's your home base?
I'm from Boston.
Boston.
Yeah.
All right. So how about
thank you so much for having me, George. It was really fun talking with you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, and you'll be on our site, and so look forward to maybe having you back on the show sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we're going to say goodbye now to Jackson Mckenzie, and we're going to say goodbye now to our wonderful listeners. Actually, we got a few more minutes here. So anyway, if you've just joined us, I'm George Yates, and we've just spent the last hour with Jackson Mckenzie. He's the author of this book, psychopathfree.com, and it is it's those folks who've been recovering from emotionally abusive relationships, either with narcissists, folks that for whatever reason just lack the kind of empathy and conscience that the rest of us have. So there's a difference between, when you make a mistake or you did hurt somebody, most of the time you're sincerely sorry for it. And, the person that has this kind of personality disorder, will rarely admit that they've done something wrong. And if they do, they're probably just saying it because they think it might get them something, so they don't really feel it. So it's a lack of empathy, a lack of conscience. If you want to know more about these personality types, you need to go to what they call the DSM-5, and that's the scientific treatment of personality disorders, what they call cluster B. And that's the antisocial personality types. Many of them break laws, have no conscience, take advantage of people. And they're all within that DSM-5. If you've just joined us, I'm George Yates. This is Justice for All. Join us again next Saturday from 2 to 3, and we'll have another great edition. And you can go to our website at www.ghylaw.com and listen to today's show in its entirety. And we'll like to see you next week. So have a great day. Bye now.